Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Temperature Check webinar series. I'm Nili Gilbert, and I'm so excited to welcome Suzanne DiBianca, the Chief Impact Officer and Executive Vice President at Salesforce, for our conversation today. One thing that we have on our minds every day at Carbon Direct is how sustainability is integrally connected with the huge progress and breakthroughs in technology that are running forward in the modern world. New technologies are at the foundation of so many solutions ahead, and we also need to deliver them in a way that keeps us on track with our other goals. So, how can we as leaders drive this intersection? Suzanne has been at the forefront of this type of integration throughout her professional journey. She's been with Salesforce for 25 years since its inception. She founded the Salesforce Foundation and pioneered its 1-1-1 model, which commits 1% of the company's equity, technology, and employees' time to build a more equitable and sustainable world. So I'm so excited to speak with you today, Suzanne.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Uh, so I talked a little bit about your background and the leadership that you've shown in this space for a long time. I thought to start, it would be really interesting to ask you, as you look at the arc of progress in the fields of sustainability and technology, going back to your early history in the industry and the journey we've been on since then, how are you seeing the landscape today and thinking about the future?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. If I think back 2 decades and I think about technology and I think about climate, I think that they have grown together in a way that has been, I think, really quite beautiful and complementary. So, as we started in the early days at Salesforce to think about a new model for software, which was provided over the internet. It was back in the days where you were getting CDs in the mail. And we said, there's got to be a new way. You've got to be able to do this through this new technology, right, called the internet. You've got to be able to do it through a new business model, which is subscription, pay as you go. And then we sort of tagged along to that a new community model, which is as you build a company, look after people and planet at the same time. So if I think about that first chapter, which is really the boom of the internet, and I think about where climate action was at those moments of time, I think a few things sort of come to mind for me. First of all, the world just got a lot smaller through the internet. And so, things that were happening in Bangladesh were at the time, sort of very far, very distant from things that were happening in other parts of the world. And when the internet came online and brought communities closer, I think we began to see more at a global scale some of the impacts that climate change was having at the time, particularly as it showed up with extreme weather events and being able to take action for that. So you saw the rise of the crowdfunding platforms like GoFundMe and a number of other ones, so that me as a executive in San Francisco could actually support communities in Bangladesh in a way that I'd never been able to do in that kind of a rapid environment. So the rise of the internet just brought the issues closer to home, enabled you to take action faster. And then some of those sort of early companies built on using the internet to do those types of things for climate, both build awareness, collaboration, take local action, etc. And I think you saw but at the time there was still, in my personal view, less focus on the systemic issues of climate change and more on the issues of local climate problems like pollution, air pollution, water pollution, recycling, trash, sort of more localized issues until the came on board and really exploded everything and how we can engage. And then you sort of saw the next chapter, which was the chapter of the mobile revolution. right, in the early 2000s when the iPhone was invented and the iPad. And you were able to have this very powerful tool in your pocket, a supercomputer in your pocket. And you saw some of those for early internet companies sort of come onto the mobile platform. But what you also saw was being able to provide data to local communities in a way that they hadn't had access to education information. So those are rural farmers, for example, in India or in places in Africa that were now kind of being connected at a local level through a handheld device. We could push out information on crop yields or, weather systems or financing that loans that were available. And you started to see the rise of the companies that were born mobile first. And that was really exciting as it related to climate change because again, the world got smaller, but it included more people. It was kind of this move of including communities that hadn't been, part of this revolution so far and that had, issues in their own community that they could then solve through a mobile device. And now I think we're in this next chapter, which is the chapter of AI and robotics. And I see again more. I'm talking a lot about weather today because I'm recently off the phone with a Earth observation company that's doing incredible stuff with predictive weather patterns to insurance companies, local farmers, etc. But if you see the sort of AI revolution and robotics, what I think that is going to do and what it's already been doing in the climate space is it's accelerating the pace of change. And so it's enabling conversational interfaces to take action on issues versus a search first or a mobile first, which is what you saw in the first two chapters. We're seeing robotics companies that are, sending spiders up to fix wind farms. And those are very dangerous jobs for humans. They take a long time to fix. It's the number one issue if you're looking at wind projects is the maintenance of the blades. So if you take robotics and you add on top of that a software layer to kind of predict damage or give fast fixes, it actually just enables the acceleration of change in a way that is much, much faster. So, we see the rise of AI and robotics to be really this next wave of what's going to power forward the climate tech revolution in particular.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And another thing that I'm hearing in what you're saying is that it opens up new opportunities. It accelerates things that we were already doing.
That's
An
right.
example that you gave with robotics de-risks them, but also is creating new opportunities, new industries. And this is one of the reasons that AI is seen as such an engine of future growth.
That's right. And faster action. I mean, it's all about response
Mhm.
time in certain areas. If you take wildfires, for an example, incredible companies that are coming. That is fighting wildfires is an industry ripe for disruption, if you will. Not much has really changed in the last 100 years on how to fight fires. And so we know that if you can contain the fire in the first 5 minutes, that is, massively important to communities so that it doesn't spread and it doesn't get out of control. Pano AI is an incredible company that we've invested in that has both hard tech and software tech, but it actually enables the detection of a wildfire within the first 5 minutes and is able to send out relief much faster than it has in the past. So it's this rapid ability this to go faster to address some of these issues, in addition to being much more predictive,
Mm-hmm.
getting
Mm-hmm.
past some of these issues.
I'm so excited that you brought up the topic of AI, which we're all spending so much time on now. And Salesforce is also a leader in this revolution, specifically with Agentforce, which, as I think about it, it's a layer of the Salesforce platform that employs customizable agents to handle a range of business use cases. So Agents are like a digital labor force that work alongside the human employees in your company or your organization to exceed the bounds of normal capacity. So I heard your CEO, Mark Benioff, say that agentic AI will become a new economic model, a new labor model, a new productivity model, and eventually a new economic model. And your chief people officer said that this is the biggest workforce transformation of our lifetime. So I wanted to ask about this from your perspective as a leader of the company. First of all, did I describe agent force well? How would you explain it? And what are some exciting opportunities that you're seeing at the intersection of agentic AI and sustainability?
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's very early days in a way. As we think about, we've had AI around for over a decade. This transformation is around this AGI, right? It's around this generative, this kind of conversational interface. And you did a good job explaining agent first. We think about it as humans and digital labor working together. So there will likely be some job displacement as there is in every revolution. However, there's going to be a whole bunch of new jobs that are going to come online that we're already seeing. Like, there's going to be AI managers, right? You're no longer going to be managing just your physical human workforce. You need to manage your agent and your AI workforce. And then there's AI ethicists. And so this digital labor that's coming online is really just empowering, particularly for the NGO sector, but also in many startups, that's being able to be sort of responsive 24/7. And we talked about that a little bit with kind of rapid response and what I think AI is providing. And in the climate space, particularly, I'll just give you two examples. Great organization, one nonprofit, one for profit. Great nonprofit we work with called Good 360, who does disaster relief. And they basically mobilize resources after floods and fires and all kinds of natural disasters. 40% of what is donated in disasters generally goes to landfill. And so that's because it's not the right product and it's not the right time or it can't get to the right place. So we built an agentic layer for Good 360 that enables much more precise donation of goods and services so they get to the people who need them at the time that they need them. Also optimizes routes, so it's sort of saves emissions at the same time, but it was really built more for this kind of rapid response. So you can basically ask the agent, I own a I don't know, Bed Bath and Beyond, just say, and I have all these, blankets that I can donate. And you just basically talk to this agent and say, where can I donate? And then that agent will get back to you and I'll give you a sort of very short list. And then you can sort of say, I'm interested in this organization. They can get back to you on time to drop offs. And it really just takes so much time out of the process, but actually it saves a lot of waste as well. So that's
Mm-hmm.
sort of one example in the NGO sector we've had a lot of success with in terms of a human working alongside of an agent to get goods and services to people in need. There's also another group in India. There's many examples. We have actually 150 use cases, but for-profit organization called Producers Trust that works in the regenerative agriculture space. And they're working in India with smallholder farmers. And through WhatsApp, you can again they've built this agent, this agentic layer, which essentially through WhatsApp enables farmers in their own language. And there's many, many dialects and languages in a country like India, for example. So within your own language, you can either speak to or you can type, what is I only have a market in my village on Monday and Thursday. What can I do to get my products to other markets in a seamless way? And it will kind of come back with a short list of markets that are within a certain radius of you, or it gives examples for how to preserve those foods in a way that will actually make them last until the next cycle of the market. Or it could say, here's financing. So it's a big part of it is kind of financing for how do you turn a traditional farm, small farm that uses a lot of pesticides into a regenerative, natural farm. It'll give kind of financing to do that and how to pay off those loans and how to do loan collectives. So they were able to reach 1 million farmers sort of through manual training, where they would send people out into the field to kind of work with local farmers to deliver through WhatsApp. And they were, able to go from 1 million to 6 million reach in a very short period of time. So if you think of that's just one country. And if you think about how many smallholder farmers we have globally, it's really powerful to be able to have these agents empower these local farmers to get information much faster and improve their livelihoods. So those are just two examples of how we're seeing agents and humans work together.
That's huge because from my side, I see so many large multinational corporations that have smallholder farmers in their supply chain and are thinking about different ways of empowering them. And this is a really good example of that. Both of your examples, I think, also bring to life the three different waves of tech revolution and how they come together, kind of from internet to mobile that gets solutions into more people's hands. And then how AI drives all of that and in a way that is inclusive.
Yeah, and fast.
And fast.
People could only work 8 to 10, 10 hours a day. In technology, we work maybe more than 8 to 10 hours a day.
I was going to say.
Agents can work 24/7.
I know that a lot of times Salesforce is customer zero, the testing ground for some of your own innovations. Are you using agents anywhere in your work?
We are. And, we share with Carbon Direct, we were talking a little bit about this earlier, this kind of need right now that we have globally to collect all of your carbon data. So whether that's compliance driven or it's driven by a net zero commitment, or frankly, it's driven by a ROI conversation in terms of reducing energy costs, knowing where all that data lives and getting it in an accessible, actionable way is how we're using it today. So we've built something called an emissions intelligence agent, and it lives on top of our emissions data. And that's a data that comes in through various systems like our travel system and Concur, and it comes in through our spend, and it comes in through our energy bills and various buildings. And so we now have it all in one place, which is really important to have an effective agent. You've got to have good data, and you've got to have data that is, both structured and unstructured, but in a kind of common lake. And so we have something called Data Cloud that we integrate with Snowflake and Databricks and all the other big vendors there. But I say that because what's important is around getting a actionable set of data. So I'll just give you a little example, which is, I just put into my conversational interface to what's my worst performing building? And it came back, in 5 seconds and said, your worst performing building is in Boulder, Colorado. And I didn't even know we had a building in Boulder, Colorado. Small office. I was very surprised because I went to college in Boulder, Colorado, and it's a very progressive green town. Turns out their grid is not very clean because of the coal mining history and in general. And it was a very old historic building with single pane glass. And we were renters, like most companies are. But what was interesting about that is what I said next was, first of all, I said, tell me more about the building. And then I said, tell me who owns the building. And then I said, tell me what I can do to change, to make it a much more efficient building. And it gave me a list of recommendations and actions. And then we were able to take that data to the other tenants in the building and come as kind of a coalition to the landlord and say, if you do these retrofits to the building, it will essentially save you money from an energy perspective, and it will enable us to hit our climate targets. So that's a very micro example of actionability with data. But I never would have been able to, even in the old world, before I had an agent on top, I could have just seen the worst performing building. But I wouldn't have known what to do about it. I wouldn't have necessarily, it would have taken me a whole bunch of time to figure out who owned it, who were the other tenants, what were the policies, what were the ROI costs. All of that, would have taken a couple days of research, whereas it happened in minutes. And so that's an example of how we're being customer zero. We're doing the same thing with our carbon portfolio. We used to run these big, long RFP process and pull in data from rating systems. And, so much of that is publicly available information today that we can really save time on our core portfolio development. We think probably by 50 to 75% of time savings, which then gives back to us time of a brilliant person
Yeah.
who do a lot more work in terms of thinking forward versus sort of looking back.
Yes, that's one thing that was coming to mind for me as you were speaking. I talk with so many chief sustainability officers and C-suites, and they say our team spends so much time on data and gathering and cleaning and reporting that we wish that we could find more time to do other things like build out new capabilities, new product lines, focus on innovation. And
Yeah,
so freeing up time from one thing also opens up a lot of opportunity to do more generative work. And that's true in sustainability and
that's
beyond.
true. 100%.
One thing that we've been thinking about a lot at Carbon Direct too is as we build up these use cases for AI, how do we make sure to develop it sustainably? How do we think about energy usage? How do we think about water usage for AI compute power? How are you thinking about that at Salesforce?
Well, yeah, we're not a hyperscaler like a Google or an Amazon or a Meta. So we're not building data centers. That said, we are a supplier. Sorry, they are our scope three. That is our biggest scope three is our data center footprint. So we have to work very closely with the folks I just mentioned, Amazons, the Googles, et cetera, to really ensure that where we buy power, for example, is a big part of our decision-making process. So we'll focus a lot on the Pacific Northwest in the United States, for example, where they have a much cleaner grid. So location matters in terms
Yes.
of powering the grid, essentially. We think a lot. We do have some LLMs that we build in-house, and these are kind of industry LLMs. And we're an LLM agnostic. So when you use Agentforce, you can actually pick your LLM. But with the ones that we build are small models. So we actually don't think you need to train on the whole internet to solve a problem in healthcare. And so when you're not using those massive amounts of compute energy for training, you're using way less energy overall. And so we think about that. There's new technologies that are coming online too to cool data centers that are not water-based. Water, you mentioned that is also a very big issue. And so we think about energy from, how do we work very closely with our core data center partners in terms of where we contract, and we think a lot about it from kind of a geolocation perspective. We think a lot about building our own LLMs from very targeted training resources, not massive data sets. And then we put together something called the Energy Score. We launched it in Paris about a month ago, which in partnership with Hugging Face. And you can actually go there now and you can actually compare and contrast energy usage from various providers so that as you're thinking about who do you partner with in building your AI strategy, you can actually just go in and look and get kind of under the covers of where is this energy coming from and what are the partners that are going to work for you based on your own goals. So transparency is a big part of the conversation. So that's really a big first step for us was this energy score, which enabled this kind of transparent layer so people could get the data that they need to make good decisions.
That's great. Yes, at Carbon Direct, we've been thinking a lot about data center buildup. It's in a lot of companies, scope three, and really growing. The topics that you've mentioned, energy usage, really understanding the grid, and then also methods for electricity accounting that can
Hmm.
differ from company to company. Um, and also, really interestingly, when we think about data centers in their scope three, you've got a lot of embodied emissions and the cement and the steel, and how do we kind of manage the whole system? And so the engagement that you do as customers, the engagement that we provide as partners, the whole ecosystem is really working together to figure this out. The good news is there are a lot of highly committed companies like Salesforce in that ecosystem and among the hyperscalers. And so I'm confident that we can do this in a way that benefits the world without hampering our goals too much. I
Yeah,
think that
yeah. Well, just an interesting note on that. We compete with Microsoft in some areas, we done other areas, but like if you think of big tech, I've just been really impressed with the innovation, and Microsoft has like hired a number of biomimicry folks as they think about their data center build out, which is what can we learn from nature, and how do ants keep, just as one example, keep their hives cool in a desert environment. And so, what can we learn from nature to kind of from a cooling perspective, from an energy production perspective. So people are being very innovative. I think there's a lot to learn from nature in a lot of areas, actually. And I've been really impressed with the innovation.
that's really cool. I think that this is so integral to the future. It's going to become such a big part of how we do everything that it starts to double back on informing corporate strategy itself. Like it's not just one corner of the business, it's a really big part of the future of many businesses. And I've really enjoyed learning about your strategic planning process at Salesforce. I read your CEO again, Mark Benioff, has written about this process of managing vision, values, methods, obstacles, and measures. It's long, so you call it V2 bomb. I'm curious from the perspective of sustainability and impact, how does this come through the company's strategic alignment process?
Yeah, it's great. So good job describing the V2 mom. It's our planning process. We are religious about it. Every executive has a V2 mom at all ladders down from the company's sort of main one. I think from a sustainability perspective, two things happen. One is it's a value to the company. So we have five corporate values: trust, customer success, growth and innovation, equality, and sustainability. So those are not for a company like Salesforce. They're not just like a poster on a wall. They're something that we operationalize. So we've had these as very steady values for a long time. We added sustainability about 5 years ago. And what happened then was awesome because we operationalize those values. We don't say they're important to us and we live by them. We operationalize them. So when we added sustainability as a value, it was great because I was able to go to our chief marketing officer and say, how do you want to do events differently? Low water events, all digital versus a print And so marketing came back with this whole plan on how to kind of green events. Just one
Mhm.
example. Engineering came back and said, what if we did sort of a carbon to serve calculation where we're working with our customers on how to run reports so they're using less energy, how we're doing development and engineering in a way that's much more efficient. And so I was like, great. And then finance came back and said, well, we're about to buy this company called Slack. Should we do that with a green bond? And we were like, great. So every part of the company operationalizes our values, not a small sustainability team, of which is one of the teams I look after. Um, so it's not just an add-on, kind of a bolt-on to the side. It's
Mhm.
really woven through the companies. And so when you go through those, all those departments have basically the same common values. And then you look through your methods, which is how am I going to get there? And then they get operationalized in the company. So that's how we think about it. We don't think about it as a small team who goes off and does interesting carbon projects. And we do have a small team that goes off and does interesting carbon projects. But the bigger play for us is how do we take all 70,000 employees at Salesforce and make them sustainability champions based on their job type? And so it's been awesome. And HR said, for every new hire that we hire, we're going to plant a tree on their behalf. And we're going to keep,
Oh,
for each new hire, we're going to then, it's not going to be a one and done. We're going to show them how big the tree got in a year and how big in 2 years. And we're going to enable them to go visit these tiny forests. And so, I would not have ever thought of that idea, but our onboarding team did. So it's great because there's things that I would never see or think of because I'm just not as close to the work.
what's really cool about what you're sharing about the way that the values comes into different methods across all of the executives and divisions and the examples that you're sharing, I can also hear how bringing sustainability into the picture has caused them to innovate and bring new benefit to the company through that lens. So it's not only is it not just a we live our values, but it's like sustainability as a part of the business case, part of how you drive success as a company.
Yeah, and how we spend money, right? So we had a goal last year to reduce our overall travel emissions because we're trying to bend the curve for Salesforce, and we sort of reduced 2% last year, which was crazy for a growth company like ours. But what that travel savings did was save company money. So
Mhm.
when you save carbon, you save cost. So it's a really nice symbiotic relationship there.
So when you look at your own, so you've been doing VT moms for since I think that's like you've been doing it since the company's founding.
That's, yeah, since the company was started.
So when you think about your own over time, have you seen any threads that are consistent? I mean, the company is fast growing, it's constantly changing. Are there threads that are consistent, or are there things that have evolved a lot through time for you personally when you look at your own?
Yeah, it's great timing because I just submitted my V2 mom last week. I've got our global team coming, 100 or so people to San Francisco in the next 2 days, and we're going to go through the V2 mom. We're going to hack it. And so we enable the whole team to kind of go through, put their own feedback in, make it their own. I think there is more consistency than not. So, but there's always evolution. So it's sort of like a yes and.
Mm.
So consistency are things like emissions reductions, right? This is a path that we have been on for a decade. And so that is a consistent thread that goes through. How we reduce emissions in the age of AI is very different than
Mm.
it was actually before mobile as well. So it sort of changes as the industry changes. So now we're thinking like this energy score example is something that is in our emissions reduction method in a way because it's enabling our supply chain to reduce their own emissions by having transparency in their providers. And then it kind of it lifts all boats, if you will. So it evolves based on the kind of time that we're in. Education has always been core to the philanthropy team, which I also look after.
Mm.
Now we're thinking, and we've always been very focused on STEM skills and middle schools. But now when you read you'll see all of that. You'll see STEM, you'll see middle schools. You saw that 10 years ago, you saw it 15 years ago. But what you'll see this year is training, teacher training on AI tools. You'll see a number of things that really try to, policy, school policy. 90% of schools don't have policy on AI tools right now. It's crazy. This has been 2 years since we've had ChatGPT launched. And so
Hmm.
schools are not they don't understand like business as how to move quickly as technology changes. And so
Hmm.
what you'll see on our education method is around no one sort of left behind. What we're worried about right now is there's going to be another digital divide. And
Yeah.
so education institutions, NGOs are not going to have the skills or the money to really leverage the AI revolution. And so with all our partner NGOs and education, that's all we're thinking about. We've been doing AI and education summits. We did one in New York recently, actually. And what we learned was um, there's not a lot of collaboration happening because all these tools are so new. And,
Mhm.
and teachers don't know how to use them. Principals don't know what to do and what to bring in. So it's just very early days. And then there's all these AI, and kids are already way ahead, right? They've been using these tools and Snapchat. And so there's this kind of fear factor that happens between the student and the teacher.
Uh,
And so that's what we've been working on. So the methods stay consistent for the most part, but the industry trends are what evolves.
that makes a lot of sense. The education example that you give, I can imagine how you've been focusing on education all along, but it's changed so much over time.
Yeah.
And I think a lot about kind of the future of education, and we talk about the future of the workforce in the context of AI, and this comes back to education. And I could totally imagine that a lot of the kids are way ahead of their teachers on this.
Oh, they're so far ahead. I love the young people panels are always the best panels because they just put it right out there. But if I just think about just connecting two threads, this agent revolution and education,
Mm.
there's a great organization called College Possible that we got behind. And when we say get behind, we generally use the 1-1-1 model you described. So it's not just cash, it's technology, and it's people. So we've been putting together these little SWAT teams in the company, pro bono resources, giving some grants, giving free technology. And College Possible is working with students kind of eighth grade and above. So our sweet spot is middle school, but we do some high school work. And you mentioned workforce development, but they built a college tutoring agent, which is super cool.
Mm.
So what happens is they get 100 AmeriCorps volunteers every year that come in as tutors and work with kids. So
Mm.
that's a limited set, right, of people that can
Right.
actually respond to queries, and they change every year. So they're only there for so they've got what they were able to do through their college counseling agent was build this conversational interface on top of all of their training data. So when an AmeriCorps sort of student comes in, they can just ask questions. If I'm I don't know, sophomore in New York City in the Bronx, and I'm looking at universities and I need to understand financial aid and you can just basically put in as a student, like, well, the chat GPT, the GPT will ask you, like, what is your GPA? Are you interested in? Where do you want to school? How much do you need in financial aid? And so that student can go answer those questions in advance. So when the college counselor comes in, they've already got a short list and they're able to work much faster with the student at much broader scale. So they think
Mm.
they can 10x the students they serve by having an agent layer just in the first year. It's pretty powerful. So with
That's
nonprofits, I worry less about job displacement because they've already got super thin staffs, and a lot more about how this agentic
mhm.
layer can actually take their mission and scale it significantly faster.
Mhm. Mhm. That makes so much sense. And not all college advisors are created equal, so this also helps.
Well, in the public schools, it's the average number is 1 to 350.
Ooh,
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty incredible.
so I wanted to do
California is 1 to 500, but that's another story,
1 to 500. Imagine.
right? Yeah. So if you have a parent who doesn't speak English or
Mm,
working three jobs, never went to college, yeah.
hmm.
So I think there's a lot of really interesting power in being able to, get these information
Huge,
in their hands.
huge. I wanted to do a couple deeper dives on the two topics that you already mentioned. One is on your work around carbon. Congratulations on the 2% reductions in the context of such a high growth period. You're also doing a lot around carbon removal to manage your residual emissions. And one thing that our companies have been working together on is your initiatives to invest in high quality carbon removal projects that are for durable engineered carbon through your World Economic Forum First Movers Coalition commitment. But within your strategy, you've also been thinking about how to use your efforts to create broader scale in the industry that's much needed. Not every company is a huge sales force, and we need so many more companies doing these things. So I wanted to ask you how you think about these initiatives from a leadership perspective. Again, you have your own corporate emissions perspective, but also thinking about what's needed to achieve the system level impact that the world ultimately will need.
Yeah. And we're learning from folks like Carbon Direct in this journey. Some of it is pretty early days for us. We like to say we believe in all colors of the carbon rainbow. So blue, which is oceans based, green, nature based and trees, land, brown, agriculture, and gray, which you're sort of describing, which is new for us. So our portfolio was largely nature based and still is heavily nature based. We believe there's so many additional benefits to investing in nature than just carbon. There's
Mhm.
food production, there's storm mitigation, I mean, on and on and on.
Yes,
So
community impacts.
yeah, that's right. Community impacts, job, food, especially in the case of mangroves, where you're bringing, the biodiversity back. So we're a big fan of nature-based solutions for carbon removal programs. We are getting into engineered because it's very early. And we'll never back off on nature. By the way, you need to know on nature that you're going to lose 15% of what you invested in. So we just did an audit. We've lost about 15%, but that's what nature is, right? There's storms that take out, certain things. So I think we always build for 15% above what we think we need because we know nature is and does what nature does.
Mhm.
But we think about coalitions, to your question. We put together like the Mangrove Coalition. So we committed to buy 1 million tons of blue carbon. It actually sort of sparked a new wave in ocean carbon technologies. But we didn't do it alone. I don't think you can do any of this alone. It's like you pointed to the First Movers Coalition, which is it's all about advanced market signals, right? So, the engineered solutions are critical, and I'm learning a lot about them. We're very early days in investing in them. We went in through Frontier, which is an effort that Stripe started, along with they're sort of one of the buying entities of the First Mover Coalition. So there's kind of safety in numbers. In terms of risk mitigation when you go in a kind of coalition model. And so we've got some advanced weathering that we've just invested in. We're looking at all kinds of carbon sinks right now. And the Symbiosis Coalition is a great one, like Google and Meta. We tend to do a lot in partnership with big tech because they're our main suppliers, actually. So we want to actually, we want to kind of go together versus go on our own. But when you said that not everyone is a big company like Salesforce, I think that's super important because for smaller companies that actually want to play in this, we need buyers coalitions. So we started something called REBA, which is now SEBA, which is essentially a renewable energy buyers alliance. And it basically means small and medium-sized businesses can participate in the development of a wind farm or a solar farm, but they are just one out of many buyers, right? So they could never do that on their own, but they could do it in partnership with a whole bunch of other corporations that want to invest in that area. And those things work really well. And we're started seeing the same thing now in the kind of carbon capture and the DAC space.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, we think a lot too about how do we build scale through our efforts, and this brings us together on so many fronts. We're also supporting symbiosis, so we're touching on
Great.
other.
It's a great effort. Yeah. Maybe you
And
can describe it better than I can.
I think you did a great job.
Okay.
Yeah. And I also did want to come back to nature because I know how much passion you and the team have brought to this space. We think about this a lot too when it comes to managing that 15% loss. Also, by thinking about some of the topics that you discussed, biodiversity, in community engagement, strategies for adaptation and resilience, thinking really specifically about local geographies, which you mentioned earlier in the conversation. And if doing that work also really helps to manage risk, but also to drive co-benefits. Um, and I know that you're focused on many initiatives in nature, not only your work on carbon removal. Are there any in that space additionally that you're excited about right now?
Um, Lots. I think what's but interesting. I learned this in the pandemic actually, but we have an effort called A Trillion Trees
Mm-hmm.
that we launched at the World Economic Forum. And it's basically meant to bring together all the folks working on land management issues. So it's not necessarily net new trillion trees, it's conservation, it's restoration. It's not just planting new trees. It's a kind of meant to be an overarching umbrella. We've had governments pledge in China, in India. In fact, we're doing in Washington, D.C. later in the month, which is why I'm back east, a global gathering of all the chapters for the Trillion Tree effort. But it takes
Mm-hmm.
NGOs, it takes companies, et cetera. But one of the things I learned during the pandemic, in particular with the Trillion Tree effort, is, and I think about it now in the kind of polarized world that we're living in, nature is a great equalizer. It doesn't matter what gender you are. It doesn't matter what race you are. It doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't matter where every country, whether you're Japan and the bonsai or California and the redwood, there tends to be a tree that um, people care about, right? It's your symbol as a state, as a country. And so it's just been a really nice equalizer to like, there's just been a lot of polarization in society in a lot of ways, and like US and Argentina, I mean, all over the world. And so one thing people can usually agree on is trees are good they're good for public health, they're good for mental health, they're good for physical health, they're good for climate, they're good for everything you just said around resilience. And so we're doubling down on nature and we're doubling down on the Trillion Trees effort because we believe it's something that brings people together and we just need more of that right now.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I've had some conversations with leaders who, you know, actually question uh, climate change, or certainly question what humans' role in it is or what we can do about it. They'll say to me, however, Neely, I love to ski and I'm noticing changes in the mountains, or I love to camp and I'm seeing changes in the forests and the rivers, or this is a place I used to always love to go with my family. We used to always love to go to this beach and now it's eroding, and or they just love it, not
Yeah.
necessarily
Yeah.
changes. They just have passion for it in their hearts. And I find that's such a great way to connect with people on common ground.
Yeah. Good way to say it.
Yeah, yeah. So you've spoken about so many entrepreneurial endeavors, so many entrepreneurs that you connect with who inspire you, that you support through the 111 model and beyond, and just getting to know you over time. I've always seen how much energy and passion comes into your voice when you talk about these initiatives and the creativity and innovation that they're bringing forward. Um, I'd love to ask you as we wind up our time together, um, what gets you most excited about the world today as you get to see so many new initiatives? And if you had a magic wand and only one chance to use it, what would you do?
Hmm. I think kind of related question. I'm super bullish on renewables right now. So
Mm,
if I had a magic wand, I would have every country in the world gun for a 90 to 100% renewable energy strategy in the next year. It's possible, it's cheap, provides jobs, it's where most of the energy has come online in this country over the last years. So my magic wand would be to sort of all the politics that are surrounding all that, all the permitting that we can't get done,
mhm.
all of the complications around it goes away. And we are a society powered by the sun and the wind and, you know, nuclear. I mean, you bring in renewable things that I think are many faceted. Solar and wind are the most prevalent right now, but lots of other renewables. So that's where I would get rid of all the political constraints and the permitting constraints and just go all in on renewables.
I love that. The economics are there.
They're totally,
And this actually also takes us full circle to what we were saying about nature. There's so
yeah,
much nature that can take us to where we need to go. Who doesn't love sun or a nice breeze?
that's right.
I want to thank you so much for taking this time. I enjoyed our conversation
You.
so much. I always enjoy talking with you, and it's so generous of you to take this time with Temperature Tech.